He was just saying like everybody knows that that song is about masturbation, and I had never heard that idea before. Do you want me to comment on like where the concept of that name Violent Femmes is about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Violent Femmes, as I understand it from what Brian Ritchie was saying and made sense to me, is that a femme was something that would be something which in a playground setting or in elementary school, somebody would be called that. A boy would be called that. I had no idea, no concept of any gender issues, anything about language. The fact that it's actually the French word for women, that wouldn't have entered my head or a lot of heads of these kids in the Midwest or wherever
Certainly.
it is, to be a femme. But the ones that were the femmes were usually or always just wanted to be in peace or be left alone or not be tormented by the bullies. So the bullies were the violent ones. That's a little more detail of why his idea about the band and the name.
No, listen, I appreciate that. That's really interesting because as I was doing a little bit of research, I didn't ever see that. So let's get into Blister in the Sun from your first album. And that your debut album was in 1983. And you wrote the songs. How did if you can take us back to that moment, as much as you recall it, of when the first inspiration, that first kernel came to you for that particular song, and then your process in creating that and bringing it to life.
I am not sure if what it was that might have triggered or made me initially start with the lyrics of the song. I know some of the reasons that then I ended up writing what I wrote, but I don't know maybe what was that very first thing. Maybe maybe something of the pulse of that riff that felt like when I'm out walking, just it had that kind of energy. Certainly I was not strutting my stuff when I was out. Had any stuff to strut. It wasn't. I don't know. So
you gotta like when you listen to that riff, you gotta strut. Like everybody has to strut. Like at the Darker Waves Festival, people are strutting.
Yeah. So and maybe I too, in my own little small way, was strutting.
But so is that your typical process where you're playing around and something strikes you as being, that's interesting?
With the song Blister in the Sun, it's the thing that I think is perhaps the most interesting about when I wrote it is that I either wrote it with this thing in mind I'm going to tell you, or it followed right after. And I'll say that the little story is that I'd been to a poetry reading and exchanged a number with a woman who was there. She called me and said that she was going to put a band together. And she wanted it to be like the Plasmatics. And then I thought, well, it would be nice if I could offer a song for her to sing. And so it was either that in mind when I was writing, or it was the very last song I had just written. They came so closely together, and that was Blister in the Sun. So, and then I got a phone call saying it was canceled the next day, and then never heard or saw her ever again. I heard through somebody else that she had joined a sect and moved to Canada. And I find it interesting. Who knows where she is, or I wouldn't know her name or know to see her or anything. But if she's still around, I would guess she has no idea that that I was going to say, here, there's this song. It goes like this. Do you want it? Do you want to sing this song? I call it Blister in the Sun.
There's another story, and I hear it all the time when I speak with artists, that this strange thing happened, and that led to the moment where something really resonated, and there's different ways that happens. But if she had sung the song, life could be very different. It certainly would be different for all of us who have enjoyed it over time. You know what I mean? And so it's fascinating how that happens. And I want to ask you, Gordon, I have to ask you about the lyrics themselves. How do those flow out of you? Because Blister in the Sun, Big Hands, I Know You're the One, Body and Beats, I Stain My Sheets, I Don't Even Know Why. And I've read two different interpretations, but I'm not going to, you tell me as much as you want to about how those lyrics flowed out of you and whether there was any story behind them.
I like your reciting, particularly when the I don't even know why seemed really well delivered on your part.
I've lived the song. I love the song.
Well, okay, I'll mention a couple of things. And one thing I just thought of, which times when I've been asked about this, I often don't. Sometimes I remember, and usually I don't. Speaking of the flow, I had a thing, and I wonder, I never looked into it, if it's like some kind of, if there even is a name for this. If I'm the only one who does something, here I'm leading up there, am I the only one who does this? And it recently has happened to me again, like when maybe once a year or something, but it used to happen more often, is when I'm writing something, usually quickly or thinking about it, I don't know, the word I and the word a, I sometimes write the other one than the one that I'm thinking. So I had thought, let me go on. And I think, and now I'm not even sure which way, but then it's like a blister in the sun or like I blister in the sun. And I had thought of it one way, and then I looked back, this was right when I was first writing it, and I saw that I had written it down in my notebook with the A, like a blister in the sun. I wrote like I blister in the sun, or I get so confused, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe I wanted to write like I blister in the sun, but I wrote like a blister in the sun. I think it was, I thought like a blister in the sun, but I wrote like I blister in the sun. And I thought, oh, wow, well, I think that's better. I like that better. So there is something maybe only interesting to me, but I was very surprised a couple of years ago when I saw that a note that I had written, I did the same thing again. I like changed I don't know if it's because from way back, I didn't feel good writing capital I's. It just seemed crazy to me. So I would write it like smaller. So maybe they're closer in size, an A or an I. But yeah, so there's a little play there. It's actually fine with me to have it sung either way. But
interesting.
So which way? And then like I blister in the sun is how I think it goes, having written it. Do you? Because some people say, do you hear it as like a blister in the sun or like I blister?
I hear it as like a blister. Yeah, a blister in the sun. But when
like a, because a sounds like
a blister, like a blister in the sun. But when you sing it, do you sing it like I blister in the sun then?
Yeah, I do.
I think I would imagine that will be surprising to most of the people who listen to this.
All right, that's why you do what you do, right?
Completely, I love it. But how does that even come to you, Gordon? Like I blister in the. How does blister in the sun pop out?
Well, I don't know. Well, how does it pop? I guess you could pop a blister.
Yeah, that's true.
It's I don't know where that first came from, but the idea of certainly a blister and then or something blistering, the sun is going to cook it some more or make it blister more.
But as much as you want to tell us, I've always been curious. Big Hands, I Know You're the One, and Body and Beats, I Stain My Sheets. And like I said, I've read different stories about what that means, if it means anything at all.
Yeah, I would be interested in hearing from you what those stories are, but that would maybe take up a lot more time of you just passing along information, and that's probably not maybe the best choice for our interview, or what do you want to? You
No,
want to tell me quickly those things?
My interpretation doesn't matter. It's you're the artist, and so if you want to give us and the listeners what you had in mind with those lyrics.
All right. Well, one thing, when you say your interpretation doesn't matter, and you mentioned the listeners, I think that whoever it might be, you or anyone, your interpretation is actually the most important one for you, and how you're receiving something or taking something, or what it makes you think or feel. And that I can tie in with, I was speaking to somebody once who I kind of met randomly, and who was also a musician, and they started talking or saying how much they loved Blister in the Sun. And this is probably going back to, or definitely going back to the late 90s. And then he got to a point of saying something about the song, and you know what it's about. I said, well, I'd like to, what do you, and he kept saying, well, you know what it's about. Everybody knows what it's about. I'm like, I just wanted to tell me. And they said, masturbation. And that was the first time I had ever heard that. And the song had been out for, way over
almost 20 years.
Yeah. And he was just saying, like, everybody knows that song is about masturbation. And I had never heard that idea before.
As much as you recall at the time, but these were sounds and words that sounded right to you for the song. Is that so? Is wordplay more than anything? Is that kind of the way that I could think of it?
Sure. There's a lot of wordplay. There's a lot of just sort of fantasy wordplay. But there are reasons for it, for the things that are in there, such as when it came to the line, big hands, I know you're the one, there's such a tradition in songs that I would be familiar with, and that what is the classic thing that somebody could be attracted, saying you're the one because of your blonde hair, because of your blue eyes, because these things that are in a lot of great songs. But I felt like I wanted to have something that was different, wanted to have some other attribute than saying blonde hair, blue eyes. And then also the idea that from a male perspective, or it could be a female perspective, but that the darling is my little darling, so what about, instead of your pretty little dainty hands, there's even an old song that I think of in my head referring to the loved one's little darling's little hands, and why not say big? And I also thought of that because my hands are small, and certainly a tendency for me to be attracted to opposites. I'm sure in other ways it's attracted to similar things, but there's an aspect of opposites attracting. And so I thought, why not say big hands? Like, that's like something that, and I didn't know at that time that big hands and little hands are supposed to actually mean something else as far as anatomy with a male. That's just, that had nothing to do with anything.
Could you imagine that it would be this lasting and cross-generational song that it is still today?
Wasn't thinking about that at all. No, of course not. No thought of that. And one thing about it is, besides all the generations that I would say it now, it's reasonable to say probably three generations. The thing that still strikes me, I just a few days ago heard it again. Well, I can even tell you what it was. It was, it sounded to me like I was watching a football game, one of the ones from Frankfurt, Germany, and it sounded like in the stadium in Frankfurt that they played Blister in the Sun. And I have a brother who's a big, huge fan of a National League baseball team, Major League Baseball. And so he listens or watches all their games. And he said, there isn't a National League ballpark that doesn't play Blister in the Sun. He said, I can't speak for American League, but I know there isn't one that doesn't play it in the National League. So that to me is really striking. And I get the same feeling when I hear the Ramones, Hey Ho, Let's Go at all of these big sporting events.
Yeah.
And, you know, the most major mainstream things. And they're playing this little snippet of Ramones and they're playing a riff from Violent Femmes. It's just, and something that I remember the one time I was in the stadium when it played and somebody was like, hey, they're playing your song. And then I got, here's my swagger. When it was done, I stood up and I bowed and waved at people and said, thank you, to which people paid me no mind whatsoever. It was just like, here's this fool. And it was just invisible and it was fine. And I knew that'd be the reaction, but it was just, that to me, I think hits me every time. That I think that's amazing to have gotten to some point with the larger culture.